In episode 7, everybody heads to Driftmark for the funeral of Lena. And I mean everybody, including the king's new hand, Otto Hightower. And everybody's really disappointed about the death of Lena, but Laenor is taking it by far the hardest. I mean, he is inconsolable, to the point where during the wake, everybody's kind of milling about, talking, and Laenor is just standing in the ocean by himself, unresponsive. It's his boyfriend who has to go get him and make sure that he comes back. During the wake, Viserys goes over to his brother, Daemon, to see how he's doing. And Daemon's fine, adding in a few shots to the king. But the king misses his brother, and he offers him a seat on his council back in King's Landing. But Daemon tells him that he has no interest in going back to King's Landing. He doesn't miss home. He tells him his home is on Pentos, and he needs nothing from him. He then walks off. But this conversation is being closely watched by Rhaenyra, who, even though it's been a decade plus, still has that forbidden fruit on her mind. So she goes and chases after him. She's eventually able to catch up to him, and she tells him that everybody knows the relationship with her and Laenor is a farce, but she tried to keep up appearances. And they even tried to consummate the marriage and actually have children of their own, but it just wasn't enjoyable for them, so they couldn't do it. They then went around and found pleasures elsewhere. That's when Harwin came along. The death of Harwin sparks Daemon to put a lot of the blame on Alicent and Otto. He thinks they had something to do with it, but Rhaenyra tells him, I don't think Alicent's capable of murder. And somehow this conversation segues into their own relationship, with Rhaenyra blaming Daemon for leaving her, and leaving her in this life that she never really wanted. Daemon firing back that his life isn't exactly perfect either. But all this sexual tension building up, it's got to go somewhere. So she leans in, tells Daemon, I'm not a child anymore, and they start hooking up. That hookup leads to the bedroom. And probably the most unbelievable thing about this show is the fact that a woman who just had a baby not too long ago has sex with a guy and seems to enjoy it quite a bit. But back in the castle, once Rhaena and Corlys get alone, they start arguing when Corlys brings up the fact that Rhaena should have been the king. And she snaps at her husband, get over it. I got over it 20 plus years ago, but you still harp on it. And it's not because you want me to be queen. It's because of your own ambitions, your lust for the throne. He doesn't deny it, bringing up legacy. And if he's going to talk about legacy, then she brings up Laena. She tells Corlys that she wants Driftmark to pass through Laena's kids, not Laenor's. And he doesn't want to insult Laenor's children, but she tells him the cold hard truth, that his blood is not in those kids, because those kids are not Laenor's kids. But Laena's kids, they do belong to him. So do right by him. Because the reality is Laenor's children are going to end up on the throne one day. They'll be fine. But Driftmark should stay with Laena's kids. Corlys, however, does not agree. He tells his wife that history does not remember blood, it remembers names, and then he gets up and storms off. But the girls that they were just talking about, Baela and Rhaena, notice something in the middle of the night. It's that their mother's dragon, Vhagar, is gone. They feel like somebody must have stolen them. They wake up Rhaenyra's children, and they start looking around for the dragon, and when it finally lands, they're very surprised because Aemond was the one riding it. He looked all over the island for the dragon, and once he found it, he hopped on board and started riding all over the place, and the dragon had no problem with it. So once he hops off the dragon, he tells both girls, that dragon's mine now. And they take great offense to it. They remind him that that dragon belonged to their mother, and thus it should belong to them, but he tells them that their mother's dead, and maybe they should have claimed it. This sparks a pretty big fight, and every kid has a little bit of blame in it, but Aemon probably has the most. He goes off, he punches Baela in the face, he's throwing kids around, and at one point, it looks like he's about to impale Lucerys' head in with a rock until Jace pulls out a knife. Aemon starts mocking both the boys about the fact that their father is dead. And while Jace had some idea about this, he even approached his mother regarding it, Lucerys is completely unaware. So when Aemon goes off and calls both kids a bastard, Jace pulls that knife out and slices Aemon's face up, cutting his eye really good to the point where he's never going to have an eye again. This brawl, ending in blood, causes a midnight meeting between the family, where the king is outraged. So is the queen. She puts all of the blame on Rhaenyra's children. But the king just wants to get to the bottom of how all this transpired. And that's when Rhaenyra says, well, Aemon decided to say some pretty interesting rumors. Rumors that normally would get somebody killed. But since he's your son, I'm not going to demand that. So how about you find out where he heard it from? That's right, Rhaenyra is still playing like these kids are indeed Laenor's children. But the king does like this idea, so he asks Aemon, who at first doesn't say anything, but his eyes shoot over to Alicent. Although when it comes time to actually answer the question on where he heard these rumors, he says Aegon. So the king goes and questions Aegon, who is hungover at the time. And Aegon doesn't betray his mother either, just saying, come on, look at them. Everybody knows it. They look nothing like Laenor. This is the worst kept secret in the realm. The king doesn't really know what to do with that comment, so he just yells that this infighting has to stop because they're a family. They need to apologize and move on. But moving on is not something that Alicent is willing to do. She demands that if her son had an eye taken from him, then an eye should be reclaimed. And she even goes so far as to command Sir Criston to go and take Lucerys' eye. And that is something that even Criston is not willing to do. The king walks over to her and says, this matter is over, but to her, it's not. And when the king turns to walk away, she grabs Aegon the Conqueror's dagger and makes a beeline over to Lucerys. She's stopped by Rhaenyra, who is holding her back, and the two women get into a verbal argument. Alicent being extremely bitter because, as she puts it to Rhaenyra, I did my duty. I respected the crown. I did everything that I was supposed to. And you, well, you just ran around disrespecting the crown, doing whatever it is you please. And Rhaenyra tells her, it must have been exhausting hiding behind the cloak of your own righteousness. But now they see you as you are. And that's when Alicent slices Rhaenyra's arm open. At that moment, everybody's kind of frozen because Alicent just attacked the princess and the heir to the throne. But it's Aemon who breaks the silence by telling his mother, don't worry about it. I lost an eye, but I gained a dragon, and I would do that every day of the week. And that kind of puts an end to the squabble. But the next day, Alicent still doesn't like how she handled any of it. She feels like she lost her temper. But Otto loved how she handled it. And he meets with her in the morning and tells her as much. He says, we play a dangerous game, and it wasn't until last night that I thought you could actually win it. So go back to the king, apologize, he'll forgive you, control your feelings, and in time, both of us will prevail together. So that's exactly what she does. As they head off to King's Landing, she apologizes to the king, but she's still seething and bitter. And on the boat ride back, Larys walks up to her. Having witnessed everything that weekend, he asked the queen, if it's an eye that you want, I can get it for you. But she tells him it's not necessary. Although it's at this moment that she's realizing having a guy on your side who is this loyal, who is willing to kill and take kids' eyes, that can be a good thing. So she tells Larys that his loyalty will not be forgotten. But one day, she will need his skill set and his discretion. But back in the castle, as Rhaenyra is getting tended to, Laenor finally shows up from wherever it is he was. And he feels terrible that he wasn't there to protect her, protect the kids. He tells Rhaenyra that his boyfriend is going off to battle. And once he does, he is going to devote himself to the promise that he made her, keeping up with this farce. The fact that this rumor has gone out of hand, he really blames himself for it. He vows to make this lie more believable. But after this discussion with her husband, she goes and meets with the guy that she probably wants to be her husband, Daemon Targaryen. She tells him that she cannot do this alone. And she all but begs him to marry her, uniting their blood, just like Aegon the Conqueror did back in the day. She also tells him that with Daemon as her husband, her claim to the throne won't be so easily challenged. But they can't get married with Laenor still alive. They have to do something about that. So they come up with a plan. Daemon goes off and kills some unsuspecting person. And then they stage a fight between Laenor and his boyfriend. That's pretty public. They start battling it out, and the person who's witnessing it goes off to grab the Kingsguard to break it up. But once the Kingsguard shows back up, it's the boyfriend who is standing there in front of a charred up body that was thrown into the fire. Corlys and Rhaena are distraught because they've just lost their second and last child in a matter of days. But that body is completely unrecognizable. And this ruse allows Laenor and his boyfriend to escape and live the life that they want. This also allows Rhaenyra and Daemon to finally get married. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.